with the presentation. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
It's a bit soft.
Can you hear me now? No?
It's a bit soft.
Is there a way to turn the volume up there? Okay, so yeah, I can use that. How's this?
Yeah.
Okay, a lot better.
Perfect. Yeah.
So thank you all for being here this evening. As you saw, you have some pens and papers there, so as we go through the presentation, if you have any thoughts, any questions, you can write those down, and at the end there'll be a Q&A where you can ask your questions. I also might be taking you through some breathwork and meditation exercises today, something very simple, so if you don't have any experience in that, just know that that's okay, and I don't expect you to get anything perfectly. So this is the art of gratitude, and today's conversation is a gentle inquiry into gratitude and how to use effective tools and techniques during challenging times. And so just a little bit about me. I'm Dina. I'm an end-of-life doula and a meditation teacher, and as Heidi mentioned, I've been doing this for about 20 years. My approach is really non-denominational, so what I hope that you take away from today and what I hope my students take away when I'm working with them is that ultimately your greatest wisdom is going to come from within rather than necessarily something that I'm going to say to you. It's really for you to self-reflect and to find what rings true for you. And so I hope you take this presentation as that today. So if I say something that really resonates, you can work with it and you can take it. And if I say something that doesn't resonate, you can just leave it at the door when you leave today. So I often get questions about what is an end-of-life doula. Some people have heard of birth doulas, but not end-of-life doulas. And so a doula is someone who provides non-medical support. An end-of-life doula is specifically someone who provides non-medical support to people who are actively dying or who are affected by death, for example, of a significant person. And so a doula really seeks to bridge the gap between palliative care, hospice, and also the funeral industry. And so if you met a lot of end-of-life doulas, and they were all standing in one room, they'd all probably do very different things. And so my mission as a doula is really to normalize topics that we don't often talk about in society, such as death and grief, as a way for us to really connect within community and also to build resilience as a community so that we can cultivate a real sense of support and also a deeper sense of inner peace. And so I just want you to reflect on just this for a moment. What brought you here today? What is it that you hope to gain out of today's presentation? What is it that you hope to learn? And if there's an intention that you want to write down, or even just a word that speaks to you right now that you want to write down, maybe a curiosity, I encourage you just to reflect on that for a moment. You can write that down on your paper. And I'll just give you a moment to do that. As you're still writing that down or maybe thinking of some things, I'll share a little bit with you about why I'm here, or my perspective, and why I think we're here together. So, we're all probably sick of talking about COVID and thinking about COVID, but I think something that COVID has really shed a light on is the need for actual community support and better ways to deal with things in life when we do happen to come upon those challenging times or maybe uncertain times or times of transition. And so we're here really to build that network of individual and community resilience. We're here to discover a new framework for living life. So I'm going to share a little bit about how you can maybe look at uncertainty with perhaps a different perspective that gives you more of a sense of empowerment. Perhaps even a sense of joy, even as you are facing challenges throughout life. And then finally, we're going to touch upon some techniques that will allow you to start to rewire your neurology and your nervous system for gratitude. And I'll speak a little bit more on that later. And so this is just another overview of what we'll explore. So why uncertainty and change are challenging for most people, the link between trust, presence, and gratitude, why gratitude is essential for navigating uncertainty, and then again some tips that we'll go through at the end, as well as a question and answer session at the end. And so as I was preparing for tonight's presentation, I was really thinking about, before we even get to gratitude, why is it that we're really here? What is it that we actually need tools to deal with? And when I actually thought about that, I thought, actually the root of this is really our relationship to change and how we process change or transition in our lives. And so two questions really came up for me from that. The first one is, why is change so challenging, and why is it so hard for most people? And the second question is, how do we find stability in times of transition? And so when I was reflecting on the first question of why is change so challenging, a few things came to mind. And I think one of the things that came to mind for me was that, when we go through a change, it's actually very similar to what we experience in the cycle of life. So in the cycle of life, we have our birth, we have our life that we're living, and then we have our death. And if we think about the way that we live our lives, where we're constantly experiencing change, it's kind of like we're experiencing little moments of death or dying, even if it's not literal. An example that I can give is every time we maybe change a job or change a place of residence, or maybe we leave a relationship and we start a new relationship, there is actually a process that takes place within each of us where we have to let go of something and we have to surrender something so that something new can come forth after that. And so why that can be challenging for a lot of us is that we haven't made peace with that whole cycle of life, which includes birth and death and life in between. Then that can cause us to actually not respond so well when uncertainty arises or when something challenging arises. We start to approach change as something that's negative rather than embracing it as something that's actually quite normal and something that is actually quite constant, regardless of who we are, regardless of our life experience. And so the next question is, how do we find stability in times of transition? Well, what I'm going to share with you today throughout this presentation is really a way for you to actually be with life in a way where even if something challenging is happening around you, rather than referencing that challenge, you actually start to look within as your reference point. And what I mean by that is that you actually start to learn how to trust your body and your breath and what your body and breath are saying to you in a trustful way, so that regardless of what is happening around you, you don't get so reactive to the circumstances. And it doesn't mean that life isn't challenging or things don't happen that, that sometimes we aren't, we don't find challenging, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. It's just that we have a way and a mechanism and a strategy to deal with those challenges in a way where we can acknowledge our experience, but also be totally present and trustful in our bodies and with our breath. And so if I say this all in a different way, feeling distressed about uncertainty and change, especially as it relates to what is outside of our control, is often a result of being disconnected from trusting ourselves. And rather than focusing on why it is that we're not trustful in the first place, I think it's more important to ask ourselves, well, how do we regain that trust? What is that process of starting to rebuild our trust with our breath and with the body? So as I pointed to just a moment ago, it's really learning to reference the breath and reference the body and reference ourselves and our internal wisdom, and learning to feel safe and trustful in what the body is saying to us and how the breath is moving through us. And the way I talk about this, and I've used this word already today, is or this phrase already today, is it's really about rewiring the neurology in the nervous system. So if I give a very, just a real example, if you think about a time you were stressed, or maybe you witnessed somebody else who was stressed out, you can see it in their bodies. They hold tension. I know when I'm stressed, my shoulders kind of get a little bit higher. I'm tensing my jaw, my voice changes, my breath is very short. But the moment I actually relax, my voice actually deepens a little bit. I can feel my breath in my belly. I can actually hear what's going on around me. I'm more present to my senses. And so how we can start to do this on a daily level is through a daily practice. Now, this daily practice doesn't have to be yoga or meditation. For me, that's what works, but also I really love to sing. So it's really those activities that, it's an activity that allows you to go from a state of just doing a task, just to accomplish it, and it actually is something that you can translate into more of a state of being. So this is something that, if I say this again another way, it really can be anything. It can be gardening, it can be cooking, it can be anything that gives you joy. Anywhere where, when you're doing that activity, even if it's for a split second or a split moment, you can actually get into what a lot of people refer to as a flow state, where you are just actually with your senses, present with your breath, and you're actually bypassing all of the analysis that is constantly going on in the mind. And really what I'm suggesting, this is not something that happens overnight. This is something that takes time. And sometimes it takes some exploration and really some deep reflection for us to actually consider, what is it that actually gives me joy? What is it, and where is it where I actually feel like I'm really present with my breath and I'm really one with my body and my breath? And so we're going to do a little practice right now. So if you are holding your pen and paper, you can just move it to the side, and you can stay seated exactly where you are. And as I mentioned, if you don't have any experience with breath work or meditation, that's really okay. It's just a very simple exercise. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes in a moment, and then you can go on this little journey with me. Yeah? So go ahead and allow your palms either to be on the belly or resting comfortably in the lap. Close your eyes, and if that doesn't feel comfortable, see if you can at least soften your eyes so there is not so much alertness in the eyes. You know, you don't have to be completely rigid for this whole exercise. So at any point, if your body wants to move a little bit, or you want to get a little more comfortable in your seat, you can allow yourself to find that comfort in the body and just settle in a little bit more. So take a couple of just breaths in and out of the nose or mouth, and exhale out of the nose or mouth, whatever is most comfortable for you. And just see if you can find this time just to feel the floor, feel the ground beneath your feet, feel the chair beneath your seat. Notice any thoughts. And your thoughts are okay, it's not right or wrong to have a thought, they're just there. Now I want you just to imagine, I'm going to ask you to use your imagination for this little bit. See if you can imagine just a time you're very joyful, or a moment of joy. And it's okay if it's a small moment, it doesn't have to be profound, it can just be a joyful little blip in time. And as you hold that thought or that memory in your mind's eye, just observe in the present how your body feels. And again, we're not necessarily looking for big cathartic realizations. These are sometimes very subtle realizations or awarenesses. See if you can just gently let go of that for a moment. You can come back to it later, but come back just to the neutral slate of your breath. And now I want you, just for a moment, to think about a time that was stressful. And you don't have to go too deep into the story. It doesn't have to be the most stressful moment, maybe just a little stressful moment. And now I want you just to observe how that lands in your body. Notice any awareness, any shift, even if it's a subtle one. And now gently let that go. And just take a few deep breaths, inhaling deeply through the nose or mouth. And then letting out a sigh or a big exhale, just allowing it to fall out of the body. And we'll do one more little exercise while we're here with our eyes closed. I'm just going to do a simple scan of the body. Maybe some of you have done this before, so if you've done this before, you can go for it. Otherwise, just follow the sound of my voice. So I'm going to take you through one body part at a time. And just simply be aware of any sensations in that area. And perhaps if you're noticing any tension, try not to judge that tension, but see if you can bring all of your softness and kindness and generosity to that area of the body. So starting with the crown of the head. Moving to the forehead. To the eyes. To the nose. If you feel a deeper breath coming out, try not to stop the breath. Just let the breath be as big or as small as it wants to be. Going to the ears. Your cheeks, your mouth, including your tongue. See if you can soften the tongue, the chin, the throat. The shoulders, your whole right arm, your whole left arm, the chest, the belly, the pelvis, the upper legs, your knees, your lower legs, both of your feet. And see if you can feel your feet touching the earth. And just take a moment just to be aware of the whole body. Notice any shift. So it's a very simple exercise. It's a body scan meditation. You can do that even if you're, say, gardening, or doing your favorite activity. So it's a very real way that you can actually start to build that awareness of the breath and build that awareness of your senses. Does anybody want to share anything that they experienced there? Yes?
I guess when you speak about the touching the earth and different aspects of things, which is really, can be really powerful, being aware of it.
Such a good point, thank you. Anybody else?
Didn't hear that.
No, I didn't. She said she experienced her feet touching the earth, which was really powerful and grounding. I think that's what you said. Yeah. Does anybody else want to share? Yeah.
Also, the good memory was smelling a rose. I like to stop and smell the roses. So when I found one that I really, that has a really deep scent and really beautiful vibrant colour, it just goes right through my body and it just liberates me.
Yeah.
Whereas the bad or bad memory, I just immediately my breathing was much more shallow. And tension around my neck straight away. So that was they were the things I noticed in my body.
Thank you so much. I've heard you to write down anything you noticed for yourself in that exercise. And so the reason why I started that little journey that we did together with remembering something joyful and remembering something maybe stressful or challenging is I think it's important when we start to do these practices to really acknowledge how powerful the mind is. And so that actually always astounds me when I think about how if I just think of something joyful, if I think of something stressful, even if it's from the past, that actually has an effect on my body in real time. And so if I don't do practices to actually rein that in and to be aware of the power of the mind, and actually, when I face a challenging moment or something that happens in my life that, kind of throws me off balance, then, I'm not as prepared because I'm allowing my mind to roll that moment rather than to remind myself that actually I have the power to be really connected and present with my breath and with myself. And so that's a good exercise to do every once in a while just to check in. Another way to build inner trust and start to build this connection is to really reflect on what brings you joy. And yes, as we did that exercise, that's a really great thing to do, even if you're cooking or even if you're doing whatever activity is that you're doing. So it's not mindless in a way, or it's not on autopilot. You actually start to become aware of your breath and your body as you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. And so as we start to move now towards gratitude, what we've established today is that even before we get to gratitude, we have to establish a baseline level of being present, and that really takes us to be aware of our breath and also to start to build that connection that's trustful with ourselves. And so as I was reflecting on gratitude, I was thinking, what is gratitude really? Is it just a gratitude journal that sometimes people think of? Is it something where we just say thank you and then we move on? Is it a fleeting experience? And furthermore, why is it that sometimes when we say we're grateful, we might say one thing, but the actual experience of gratitude isn't there? And just so you have the dictionary definition of gratitude, it's the quality of being thankful and the readiness to show appreciation for and to return kindness. So as I was reflecting on that, none of it's right or wrong. Definition is right, but I actually thought that, there's actually something more to this. There's something more to gratitude. And as I mentioned a moment ago, people do think that it's just writing in a gratitude journal, which can be helpful for sure, but there's actually some research that has just come out that says that there's actually more powerful ways to cultivate gratitude. Specifically, there's a podcast, the Huberman podcast. It's a neuroscientist from Stanford University, and he comes from a more scientific perspective, but he has a whole podcast on gratitude that if you're interested in checking out, I would really recommend listening to. The other thing I think people think of when they hear gratitude, or what even I used to think of when I heard the word gratitude was, okay, well, am I just saying grateful but I don't really mean it? Or if I say I'm grateful, does that mean that I'm not acknowledging my experience in the moment? And so what I'm offering for you today when you think about gratitude is that it's actually a way to hold your experience in the moment of challenge, but also to look at life in a way or from a perspective where it's not just about whether you're facing a challenge or not. It's actually that you are reflecting on what is it that I am receiving from this experience, and what am I learning about this experience, or what am I learning about myself? What awareness do I now have through this experience, whether it's a challenging one or whether it's a really joyful one? What is that awareness that I previously did not have? And so the way I like to look at gratitude, or this definition that I'm offering, is that gratitude is really an internal state of being. And when you practice it, it allows you to be with and to recontextualize life's challenging moments with empowerment. And so in this way, you start to look at life as not something that's happening to you, but you start looking at life as something that's happening for you. So that every moment, every situation is actually an opportunity for you to learn. And with that being said, you still get to acknowledge your feelings and your experience. So you don't just push away what's happening, but you actually get to look at all of it. You get to hold both of those perspectives. And this definition and this context that I'm offering you, it really is like building a habit. It's just like going to the gym, or starting a new diet plan, or starting any new habit. It takes a lot of practice and it takes cultivation. And so that's where really the daily practice that I was suggesting can be very, very helpful in starting to anchor this gratitude on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to offer you a new way to give gratitude. And when I say giving gratitude, I'm not necessarily just suggesting that this is something you do with other people, but it's more like giving gratitude to yourself in times of reflection, or if you do a gratitude journal, this can be actually a way to expand your ability to actually experience that gratitude. And this is something that takes practice and time. It's not necessarily going to happen overnight. It will take some cultivation. So when I am asking myself what I'm grateful for if I'm coming up in any situation in life, I ask myself what I'm grateful for, and also what am I receiving from the situation? What did I learn from the situation? What do I now see that I didn't see before in this situation? And how is it going to impact me moving forward? What can I shift or change moving forward in the future that will be beneficial based on what I have learned? And I think as we start to reestablish this way of giving gratitude to ourselves, or experiencing gratitude, it is asking us and allowing us to be more in the body, more in the heart space as we experience this, rather than being so much in the mind. So we'll do a little practice now. You don't have to close your eyes. This one is written. So I'd like you to write down a small challenge you had in the last week. And you're not going to share this unless you want to later on. Like, this is really just for you. And then I'd like you to write down a challenge you've had in the past 2 years or so. So as we do that, I'm just going to take a moment to refresh this. So as you write down your challenges, I want you to just consider and reflect on what is it that you're grateful for and why, or what you received from that challenge. And you can frame that in any way. But how I like to write this out is, I am grateful for whatever that thing is. What I received is whatever that thing was. So if you need an example, like if someone gave me a gift, this is a very simple example, I could just say, oh, thank you so much for the gift. And I could really mean it, and it could be meaningful to that person when they hear that gratitude. Or I could say, I'm so grateful for the gift. Thank you so much. What I received from it is actually your love and care and support, and I really felt that from you giving that gift to me. It's a kind of a cheesy example, but you can kind of hear the difference between when you say, okay, I'm just grateful for this, period, versus this is actually what I received from that situation. If you need another example, let me know. I'm trying to think of a better one. And so I know as we're writing this down, we're doing this as a written exercise. You can definitely do this as a written exercise at home. But what I'm also offering is actually just a new way of looking at situations, a new context, so that when you come up against something, say it's really challenging in the moment, don't ignore your feelings. Allow your feelings and experience to be there, but maybe it's something that a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, or down the line, you might ask yourself, what did I actually receive from that situation? What was the fruit of that situation, or the golden nugget of that situation? You can certainly reflect on that more. I'm sure you're going to have more realizations and more thoughts even beyond this presentation, so you can definitely hold on to your papers or write things down as you think of them. But I just wanted to go over some tips for cultivating gratitude. And these are really great to practice, yes, during times of uncertainty and change, but some of these are really good to practice when you're also feeling really good and just day-to-day life, you can practice these. So the first tip that I have is to reflect on presence and what it means to you. So don't necessarily take my definition of presence and what I've presented today, unless it resonates for you, and of course you can take it and use it. But this might be something that you actually go home and you actually sit with and reflect on and ask yourself, what does it really mean to be present? How do I know that I'm present? What is that experience in my body? How do I experience the breath when I'm present? And Other questions that you can ask yourself as reflections or inquiries is, what activities give me joy? What activities don't give me joy or don't give me energy? What activities nourish me? And I think as you start to establish that within yourself, then that's really a great place to come from and a great place to build your practice from. The second tip I have is to make it a priority to get really good at doing the basics. So I've noticed quite a lot with my students, and also sometimes with myself in the past, that when we're having a challenging time, sometimes the first thing that goes is maybe we get less sleep, or maybe we don't eat something that actually we know will make us feel better, but instead we make a different choice. It's like these little small shifts and small changes. And so what I mean when I say get really good at doing the basics is, when you're in a period of uncertainty in particular, just reflect on, am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating nourishing foods? Am I getting enough water? Am I getting time outside? What's my screen time usage like? Am I giving myself a break from reading the news or looking at social media? Also things like non-prescribed substance use. So just really knowing, just really reflecting on, am I doing these things that on a holistic level they're contributing to my well-being and my experience of actually being present? And I think this tip of being in nature is actually a bit of an extension from the previous tip. Nature can be extremely healing, and the amazing thing about living in Melbourne is that we, even if you don't have a car and you take public transport, nature is so accessible. And even if you can't get to nature, there's so many beautiful parks here. There are so many studies as well about, we actually see the color green, it changes our brainwave state, so we actually go into an alpha brainwave state where we're calm yet also relaxed. And this, I think, happens even in like 15 minutes of just being in nature, being around greenery. So I really consider this point, just the next time you are in a challenging moment, just ask yourself, have I been in nature recently? So my next tip is to make peace with impermanence in your mortality. And I think this is a big one, and this is also something that we can do when maybe we're not experiencing a challenge. And at the same time, sometimes life presents us with a challenge where we're actually forced to make peace with these things, whether we like it or not. It kind of comes up that way. And, this kind of goes back to being in nature. So when we're in nature, what happens is we're not only calm, yes, and we hear the birds, there's more stillness, there's more space, but we also get to see all cycles of life. So we get to see things that are just being born. We get to see things that are in the middle of their life. Some things are very mature. And sometimes, occasionally, we see something that is dead. And when we actually spend time in that ecosystem of nature, we start to understand that none of it's wrong or bad. It's actually all normal. And this actually goes over into impermanence and mortality, as I pointed to at the beginning of the conversation, of having these little deaths or little changes in our lives, where when we start to see that as all being normal, then our response to impermanence and our relationship to impermanence actually lightens up a little bit, it shifts a little bit, so that it's a little bit easier each time to bounce back or to actually be able to cope with whatever challenge that we have. And that's not to say that it's not challenging, it's just that we've made peace with it within ourselves. So in some ways we kind of know that, okay, change is normal, change is expected, change is constant. And a way that I do this with people, particularly as an end-of-life doula, is I work with people to plan their called advanced care directives. If you haven't heard of it, you can look it up. It's just a way for people to start to look up what are their wishes for when they are dying or when that time comes. And you don't have to be actively dying to do that process. It's actually a very real way to start start to confront and work with some of these things around impermanence and mortality. And what I see with people when I do work with them in this way is that when they actually start to go into these taboo places that we don't talk about or that feel a little uncomfortable, when we confront them in a gentle way, we start to see that maybe they're a little scary, but maybe in some ways they're not as scary as we thought. Maybe what we thought we were so fearful of is not actually there. And then by actually working with these things and confronting them, we actually can see the preciousness of life and the gift that life is, so that we can actually be present for the life that we still have left. And of course, my final tip is, don't be afraid to ask for support. If there are things that are arising as you're navigating something challenging, there's so many resources around. I know there's probably even resources in this library, I would say, that you can talk to anybody who works here about. But yeah, the resources are available. It's just a matter of just taking that step to ask or to reach out, or even just to talk to a friend and see if that feels a more comfortable way for you to go about it, to get support if you need. And so right now, what are you grateful for and why? As we start to close out our presentation, you can write that down. Another question I have is, what is your biggest takeaway from today's conversation? What did you receive from today's conversation? And just, you don't have to share with us anybody you want to share. And so when you're still writing, it's okay if you're still writing. Here you go.
I think one of the takeaways for me today is that what you've been talking about has been very affirming. I tend to think a little bit that way already, and feels like, oh, I'm going down the right path somehow. I've got a long way to go though.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? Everybody wants to share, right? Yeah.
Mine was, I'm currently a teacher's aide, so I sort of help others all day. I have to study to become an end-of-life doula, so not knowing you were an end-of-life doula, and me being here tonight has made me realise what that's it's just a connection of some sort, and I now know it's going to be able to allow me to help others whilst they're in that last phase of life. And I want to get to it, but yeah, it's confirmation.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? Maybe one or two more? Yes.
Simply that I didn't make it here. I came here because I procrastinate a lot. Every time I leave, last moment I'm catching the bus, public transport, coming here. It's just I'm grateful I'm here first of all. And this is, I'm writing songs if you can hear it clearly.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. So does anybody will lead us into questions? Does anyone
Excuse
have-
me.
Yeah.
Would you mind showing to people what I gave you? Would
Sure.
be nice, maybe. Yeah.
He gave me a little postcard before we started today. It says, an attitude of gratitude finds good in everything, so celebrate now as the latest, greatest, best time that will attend.